Good morning and welcome to our Excel webinar on Excel dashboards. I'm going to go ahead and get started. Looks like we've got a good group of people here already. So this is getting started with Excel dashboards, and my name is Allison Kennedy, and I am a Microsoft MVP and Microsoft certified trainer. So I spent a lot of time doing data analysis in Excel and Power BI and creating dashboards and working with business intelligence. So today we're going to show you how to create a dashboard in Excel that's interactive and that we can work with. If you want to contact me later, you can find me on LinkedIn, and this session is going to be entirely demo based. So what I am going to do is I am going to swap over to this dashboard here, and I'm going to turn off my camera so that you can see it in full screen, but I'm still here. If you are having any questions or anything while I'm going through the sessions, there's a Q&A on the right-hand side of your screen. You can turn that on and just pop your questions in there. I'll try to keep an eye on it throughout the talk, but I'll be doing the demo and then I'll be swapping over and having a look at the questions as they come through, see what's come through during the past however long of the demo. And there is about a 20 to 40 second delay between what I say and what you hear. So if you have a question, pop it in there right away so that I can answer those for you before we move on to the next topics. All right, so what we've got planned for the next hour is generating dashboards in Excel. And what do we mean by Excel dashboards? Well, as you can see here, I've got a nice clean display here. I've got lots of different visualizations, and what's really fantastic about this is that when I choose an item in one of these filters or slicers, that's going to update not just one of the visuals, but all of the visuals in this dashboard. You can see that I've got some KPI indicators going on to indicate whether we're meeting or not meeting our targets. We've got some nice clean numbers that I can move and align however I want. And we've got some different types of charts that are available in the latest version of Excel. So all of this is all connected and based on these slicers. So how do we do this? What we're going to do is we are going to start by creating a blank new Excel workbook. And I highly recommend that when you're working with Excel dashboards, you do try to keep the data separate from the reporting if possible. So what I'm going to do is start with a blank workbook, and I'm going to save this as my dashboard. So we'll do save desktop. Move that over here for a second. Where is Excel dashboards? There we are. Dashboard. So we'll save that as my dashboard. And now I'm ready to go and grab my data and pull it into my dashboard. So the data that I'm going to use for this dashboard is just a sample sales data set, but this could be any data that you have to work with. And what's really cool about what I'm going to show you is that your data can be in lots of different tables. It doesn't have to be one big table. You don't have to do lots of VLOOKUPs. So what I've got here is I've got lots of different sheets along the bottom of this workbook, and each sheet has different information in it. So I've got a list of all of my customers and their gender and their job description. I've got a list of my sales territories. You'll see that we've got some New Zealand-based regions in here, as well as some other areas in the world. So we're going to try and compare what's going on in New Zealand versus the rest of the world, try and be able to map our New Zealand data. And then we've got our sales table, and this is where every single sale is recorded. So as a new sale comes in, we record the sales territory, the order number, the quantity, the price, the customer information will be in here as well, the date, and what product they've purchased. And all of that information is connected to all of these other tables. But it's just normal old Excel, so there's no connections, no relationships, no VLOOKUPs, nothing in here as of yet. So what I am going to do is I've got this data here in my sales dashboard data file. I'm going to go back to my dashboard where I want to do the report, and I'm going to go to the Data tab and Get Data. So this Get and Transform Data is where all the magic happens, and you'll see that you can grab data from Wikipedia, from the web, you can get it from web scraping from your competitor. You can get data from CSV files that you've exported from your financial system. You can get data from a database if you've got things stored in Data Warehouse or in SQL. And today I'm going to get data from that Excel workbook that I just showed you. So we are going to get the data from the sales dashboard data file and import it into this Excel dashboard file. So like I said, I do recommend that you keep the data separate from the report, but it's not a requirement. It does make things a little bit easier. So you'll see here we've got our tables and our sheets in Excel, and I want to pull through all of those sheets, all of those tabs that we had across the bottom. So you'll see that those have the little icon for the tab. These have icons for Excel tables. Not going to go into too much detail on that terminology, but you can see I've used the Shift key to select all of those, and I've got a few options here. I can load to, or I can transform my data. I do recommend that you always transform the data. It's not required if you're pulling it from a really clean and tidy data set, but there are a few things that we like to do in the transform data Power Query, it's called, to make sure that the report will be efficient and work properly. So this is Power Query Editor, and I'm going to be moving really fast today because I just want you to get an overview of what's possible, see how you can create these dashboards in Excel. And like I said, if you've got questions, pop them through in the chat. Otherwise, you can let me know if you want to follow up later. So what we've got is all of those tables that I've pulled through. And the first thing that we want to do in Power Query is filter the data for only what we need, only what we want to show in the report. So I only want products that are finished goods and have a subcategory key. So I'm going to filter out all of my other products, and that's going to make my report a little bit smaller and optimize my data refresh times. The next thing that I need to do is, once we've filtered all the data from all of the tables, is check data type. One of the ones that's really important to get right is anything that you want to be doing calculations on. So I want to get the total sales amount, so I need to make sure that sales amount is a numeric data type. And you will have noticed that when I pulled the data through, Excel went through and was spinning instead of evaluating. What it was doing is it was checking for automatic transformations and looking through a preview of my data to try and guess what data type each of those columns is. And so it's picked up on the dates as dates, it's picked up on the numbers as numbers, and you can see here that I've got my formula bar turned on. You can turn that on in the View tab. This is M language. You don't need to know how to write it. There's lots of buttons here that will do all of that for you. So you can choose the data type here, or sometimes I'll do it just at the top of the column here. So we want to make sure that the data type is correct for all of our values, particularly the ones that we're going to be summing or averaging or working with. And we also want to check the dates. So I'm going to go into my date dimension table and check and make sure that that date is formatted as a date data type, which it is. So that's beautiful. All right. Now is where the important part happens. So once you've cleaned up your data, you've done all the transformations. Like I said, I'm not spending a lot of time in Power Query. There's heaps of cool things you can do. I've done previous webinars on more things in Power Query. I'll probably do more. If you want more Power Query, let me know. But today's all about the dashboarding in Excel. So we are going to load this data into the Excel data model. And it's really important here that you choose Close and Load To. Okay. If this is the first time loading the data, you need to load to the data model. If you don't choose Close and Load To, Excel will just load it as tables into the Excel report, and then you're no better off than when you started with the data. The very, very important thing that you need to do is add this data to the data model. The data model is what enables us to create that dynamic dashboard and have it interact and update the way that I was showing you. Anything else that you choose here, I don't really care. I do recommend only create connection. And the reason for that is, again, keeping that data separate from the report. You're not changing and updating the information, you're just reporting on it. You're viewing the information in this file. To update the information, you go back to the original data source. Remember, that was back to this other Excel file that has all of the tables and all of the data. If I want to make any changes to it, I need to come back here. Any table that we put in this report will be read-only and will refresh and overwrite every time I refresh the data here. So having a table sometimes confuses your end users because they're looking at the data and then they're able to change it, but then it gets overwritten. So I tend to stick with only create connection unless I have a really specific reason for needing the table. Any questions so far? I'm going to click OK and let that load. I've got a question if we can make the view any bigger. I will try. Let's see if I've got. No, my Zoom is not enabled at the moment, so unfortunately, I can't make it any larger than it is. Okay. So what we've done is we've grabbed information from a separate Excel file. We've transformed it in Power Query. We've filtered it to only pull through the information we want in this specific report. And we've loaded it to the data model. You can see that I've got all of these queries over here in my queries and connections. You can go ahead and close that pane. If you want to get it back, you can find it in the data tab under queries and connections, and you can turn that on or off. Okay. If you want to go back into Power Query, you can right click and edit to go back into Power Query and transform the data. Or if you want to change your mind, say you forgot to load it to the data model, right click, load to, and that brings up this really important box again. Remember, add this data to the data model, only create connection. Okay, so now we're looking for the data model. So the data model is in the data tab. It's this manage data model green button. It's also called Power Pivot. So you'll see when I hover over this, it says go to the Power Pivot window. And when you've enabled this or used this, you'll see that you have a Power Pivot tab in the ribbon that has that same Manage Data Model button. So I am going to manage my data model, and this is going to open up a second window in Excel. So you can see I've got my dashboard workbook here, and I've got my Power Pivot data model here. All right. So we pulled through quite a few different tables. So I can see them all down here at the bottom, and I need to create relationships between those tables. Excel sometimes picks up on the relationships automatically, but in this case, it has not detected any relationships. So it's going to make me work really hard and do all of those relationships for it. I, again, am not going to go into too many details on how to create relationships, but what we're looking for is a connection between each of these tables so that if I want to know what color is the most popular, I can filter by color, and product key is going to match to product key, and that's going to tell me how many sales I've made for each color. Same thing if I want to know which day of the week is the quietest, when do I need more staff, etc. For orders, I'm going to connect date key to order date key, and that's going to enable me to create visualizations between those. Same thing, customer key to customer key, currency key is going to currency key, and so on. We're going to be doing a bit with the sales territory, so I want to make sure to connect sales territory key so that I can do that map of the New Zealand regions. We're not going to be doing much with promotions, but we'll relate that anyway. And we'll do product subcategory key and category key because those make good slices. Okay, so this is one of the most important parts of the dashboard. If you can get this right, then all of the visualizations will just magically work. You can get lots of filters and information and insights. So setting up this data model is really crucial to success. It's not too complex when you understand your data. So this data set is completely foreign to you, so that might not have made any sense what I've done. But if you've done VLOOKUPs or you've worked with multiple tables, you'll know how your data talks to each other. If you only have one table, then you don't have to worry about it. You're just going to have a nice, beautiful data model with one table. And that's totally fine too. Okay, this here is the same file as this one. When I save this, it saves both. When I save here, again, it saves both. So I can just close this window without losing any of my work, and I can come over here and save that. That's going to save my data model as well. All right, so we've finally done all the groundwork, and we're now ready to go ahead and start building our dashboard. So when we're creating a dashboard, I want it to be dynamic. I want to be able to interact with it. And so for that reason, I'm going to insert pivot charts, not pivot tables. Pivot tables are stuck and attached to the cells. You can really only have one of them per sheet. Otherwise, it's not going to enable it to be dynamic. And if we get more sales territories or more customers, that pivot table is going to expand and get in the way of another pivot table. So instead, I'm going to use pivot charts. And normally you can't insert a pivot chart without a pivot table underneath it. But when I use the Excel data model, I can. So you'll see that I'm going to use the workbook's data model and insert the chart here on this existing sheet. So we'll say, okay, here's my pivot chart. We'll go ahead and name this our dashboard. And here I've got all of the tables in my data model. This is again another reason why I recommend that you keep the data separate from the report. So all I see here is the data that's ready for reporting. The raw data is in a separate file. If you're doing them in the same file, this list is going to be a bit longer and more confusing, but you're looking for the tables with the orange data silo next to them. That indicates to me that that table is inside of the data model and that it's related as I did in those relationships. Okay, so we want to figure out the total sales. So I'm going to find the sales amount and put that into my pivot chart. And now we get to decide what do we want to slice the sales by. Let's do total sales by category. So we can do that by category, and I can turn this into any type of chart that I want. I could make it a pie chart or a bar chart, or we've got these other types of charts here, tree maps, sunbursts, histograms. How do we do those? Okay, it says I can't create that with a data inside a pivot table. Bummer. Sunburst would be perfect to have my categories and then my subcategories. Let's see what we can do about that. So let's do this one as a bar chart. And I'm going to insert another pivot chart next to it. Again, using the data model, put it in the dashboard. You can see that I've got these two charts and they can sit next to each other. And again, we'll do total sales amount, but this time we will do it by customer, and let's do it by the occupation. Okay. So I'm happy with this one as a bar chart, but I want this one to be a tree sunburst, and I want to add my product subcategory into there as well, so that we can see that division. You can see that this bar chart, that's not terribly easy to read. I'm not loving the looks of that. So I want to create that sunburst effect, which I cannot do inside of a pivot table. So what we'll do instead is I'm going to create a new tab, and I'm going to insert a pivot table on this tab. Again, I'm going to use the workbook's data model, and that's going to ensure that this pivot table is using the same data as these charts, and I can filter everything together. So in here, we're going to use the pivot table, and we'll use the same fields that we wanted in that sunburst. So again, we're going to pull through sales amount, and I'm going to pull through the category name and the subcategory name. Now, I still can't add a sunburst chart onto this because it's still a pivot table. But what I can do is I can get this to be laid out in such a way that all of this information can be used in a sunburst chart. Once I'm happy with how this looks, then I'm going to go into the Pivot Table Analyze tab, and there's this really cool button here that says convert this pivot table with this beautiful information into cube functions. So I'm going to convert this, say OK, and then I get this really long formula here. It's using the cube member function. If you've never heard of cube functions in Excel before, that's okay. What we've got is this workbook data model. So it's using everything that's in this data model, and it has access to all of this information, all of these relationships here. Okay. And then it's saying, give me the category name equal to accessories and the subcategory name equal to hydration packs. And then here it pulls that information and gives me the sum of the sales amount. This data can be used as a sunburst. And so I've now got my sunburst chart here, and we can see bikes and the division of the subcategories with bikes. So what we'll do is we will take this chart and move it to our dashboard and get rid of this one. So we're happy with that. We'll put that over here, and we've got that one here. Okay. So any questions so far? I've got one come through here that's asking me about when I click the data, how does Excel know that I want that to be in the rows or the columns or the legend or the series? So what I'll do is I'll insert another pivot chart, and we'll use the data model again. And this time I'm going to do the sales amount. And when I tick this box, Excel just guesses where that should go. Remember how we set that data type to a number, and because it's a number, we can sum it. And so Excel thinks, well, probably you want to put that into values, right? So it puts that into values. If it was wrong, I could move it to somewhere else. So it's going to do the same thing with anything that I put in here. If I choose gender, it puts that into the categories, but maybe I don't want that there. Maybe I want it in legend. So I want a different color for each gender. And then I want to figure out by sales territory, and we're going to do group. And so when I just tick that box, it put it into the categories for me automatically. But again, if it gets that wrong, you can drag these and move these around however you want them to be. Order matters. So if I put gender above sales territory, that's going to put gender first and then filter that into the individual territories for each gender. If I put sales territory group above gender, it does my sales territory groups first, and then it does my gender. Okay, so this configuration here is really flexible. And remember, again, another reason for keeping the data separate from the report is you can't break anything in here. So go for it, just play around and have a bit of fun with your data and figure out what configuration works best, what looks right, what is it that you're trying to get. And like I said, it's a lot easier with your own data, so the more you go, the more practice, the easier it's going to become. I want gender to go back in legend. I liked having that as different colors. And then once you've got this configuration right, you need to combine that with the right chart type. So I can't very easily see the difference between each of these sales territory groups in total. So if I want to compare the totals for the groups, I'm going to turn that into a stacked column, and that makes it easier to see the total comparison. Whereas if I cared about the specific genders, I would have kept it as the other way. Right. So these two charts are pivot charts, and they've got these ugly buttons on them. So once I'm done, we can turn those buttons off so that they're not cluttering up the chart, and they're a little bit easier to visualize. It looks a bit cleaner. Total sales by occupation, so we can give those titles, clean those things up. And now what we're going to do is we're going to get that New Zealand map. Okay. Again, a map is one of those types of visualizations like the sunburst that does not work with my pivot data. And so what we're going to do is just like we did here, this is going to be sales by category. I'm going to create another tab that's got sales by region. All right, so like I said, I'm following that rule of having one pivot table per sheet. So I'm going to insert another pivot table into here. And for this one, I'm going to do my total sales, but I want to do it by region. And we are in New Zealand, so I'm going to filter this data so that it's only showing me the New Zealand regions. Again, we'll get this so that it's exactly how we want the table to be. We don't need the totals. And then pivot table analyze, all app tools, convert to formulas. So what I'm going to do is convert everything. And you'll see that that's again done that cube value function for me. I didn't have to write it. Now I am ready to insert a beautiful map for New Zealand data. And voila. There we go. If you don't get this to work so magically the first time, it does sometimes help to give that a label of state or province. Then Excel knows that you're trying to plot states rather than countries or cities. If it's still not working, check and make sure that you've used the right regions. Notice that this map is powered by Bing. So it's using Bing maps to geocode the locations. And so you have to get the right values for what Bing understands as the locations in New Zealand. We're going to give this a title of NZ sales by region. And then we're going to move this one into our dashboard. All right. So now that we've got a couple of different charts and visualizations, I want to start looking at filtering and slicing this data and making it a bit more interactive. Because right now it's just static and I can't really do a whole lot with it. So I'm going to insert a couple of slicers and turn off my grid lines as well. So because we're working with the data model, I don't actually have to have any of these visuals selected to insert a slicer for that visual. So what we'll do is deselect all of our visuals and on the Insert tab, click Slicer. Always use the data model and open. Here you'll see all of the tables in the data model and you can choose to slice or filter by any of this information that you want. So let's go for product color. And what else should we do? Let's do sales territory. We'll do country. Why not? So that has put a slicer for each of those columns or fields that I selected from my data model. And so you'll see that we've got the slicer here, and I've got a new contextual tab in the ribbon that lets me change the formatting of the slicer. So I could give that a few more columns so that it fits nicely up here. So we can choose our color. We could increase the number of columns again to make that match 2 rows and 2 rows. So now what I want to happen is when I select Canada, it filters all of these visualizations for Canada. Nothing's happening. Again, in the Slicer tab, we have this report connections. And this report connections is where I get to choose which visuals are filtered by that slicer. You'll notice that you'll only see the pivot table, pivot chart reports. I'm not seeing those tables that I converted to the cube function. So I don't see this and I don't see the map. So when I click OK, these two visuals now update. But I'm still stuck with being able to update these two. So how do we get our cube functions to update with this slicer? Well, this slicer is my sales territory country slicer. And this part's a little bit complicated. So what we've got here is a cube function that I haven't written myself. But I do need to alter it, okay? So again, I'm going to go back here, this slicer, so that was sales territory country slicer. And I'm going to show you on this one here, our cube functions allow us to have as many expressions as we need, and those expressions are basically filtering the data for that information, that measure, and these filters. Okay, so in this existing file that we've just started creating, I need to go back to get this to update with the country. I need to go back to my sales by category, and I need to put that slicer into there. So you can see, let me go away from this one. Sales by category, I am going to add slicer, and as I start typing it, there's my sales territory country slicer. So I'm going to add that one in, and I am going to add in my slicer for color as well, so that they both filter. Now, if we look at this formula, it's using the dollar signs, which if you are familiar with absolute references, you'll know that the blue cell is locked in column B, and the red cell is locked in row 1. So if I autofill this down, the slicer references are going to remain the same, but the blue cell is going to move down and stay in column B. The red cell is going to stay right where it is. So I can go ahead and safely copy that down. I've now got my slicers in all of those cells. And when I go back to my dashboard, you'll see that my sales by category is now updating with my country slicer and my color slicer. Pretty easy once you know how to do it, right? So we'll do that one more time. So I need to get the sales by region to filter. So I go into my sales by region, cube function, click into my cube function, click inside the cube value, comma, slicer, color, slicer, sales territory, country. And go. It's got a few too many things going on, but that's gonna come crash in a minute. And get that to cancel. Good lesson for saving. What questions have we got in the meantime while that's thinking? I'm gonna have to kill Excel and see what it remembered. So here's my dashboard. And it's got one from not too long ago. Cool. All right, so these slices are not connected, but we remember how to do that, so it won't take us too long. Just get those formatted. So I'm not going to worry about doing those again in the interest of time. We know how to get those to connect to the data. I will save this. Save. And what I want to do now is we're going to go ahead and work on the card visuals. So if we open, no, not that one. We're going to open this one. Nope, not that one either. This one. Sorry, guys. These here. So again, I could put total sales into a cell in Excel, but that's not very movable or flexible or dynamic. It's really hard to kind of get the cell size and shape to fit exactly within the dashboard and everything else that you want. So sometimes it's really handy to have these card visuals that just give you the bottom number, the key information that you want to know. So what is it that is my total sales, for example? So this value has come from, again, cube functions. Okay? And we know how to create cube functions. We don't need to write them. What do we need? Just a pivot table, right? So what we're going to do is go back to our dashboard that we're working on here, and we're going to create a new sheet, and we'll just call this our KPIs. And we're going to insert a new pivot table from the data model. And in this one, I'm just going to create those key metrics that I want. So I want the total sales, and I want the total quantity. Okay. And these are my values here. And what we'll do is convert those into formulas. And now I've got my cube value. Okay, that's fine, but we kind of want them to be nicely formatted. And so to get that perfect formatting that I want, you can see here that I am using another cell that takes the value in this cell and combines it with a label and the value formatted exactly how I want it. Okay, so we'll just copy this formula here, escape, and we'll paste that into here. Okay. Rather than it saying sum of sales amount, I just want it to say total sales. So we can do that as well. And this would be total quantity. So this is a good argument here for naming these effectively or using DAX measures so that you don't have to be editing each one of those individually. You saw back in the other one, it was a lot cleaner. So I could just copy that formula all the way across and have those values. Okay, so now that I've got this measure here, I'm going to go back to my dashboard and I am going to insert a text box, and we'll draw my text box. And on my text box, I want that to match the value in this cell here. And then you finally just format it however you want. So we'll make that bigger, centered. Voila. And that is how we create the card visuals. So I can copy that one and I can make that refer to, sorry, B3. All right, I've got a question about how do you decide to make a dashboard here in Excel or to create it in Power BI? And this is a really good question. So creating dashboards in Power BI is going to mean that they are mobile friendly. You can access them on the go from anywhere. It's really easy to publish the dashboard into Power BI service. You can schedule refresh on it automatically. And that means that every morning when you come in, you know that the data was refreshed overnight. You're looking at the latest information. You don't have to do anything manually. You can even get that emailed to you as a subscription, so you can have that in your inbox every morning. If you are just starting out on Power BI and your organization isn't quite there, creating Excel dashboards can be a good way to kind of start easing the organization into this idea of dashboarding and reporting, and that's more dynamic. The advantage to using Excel over Power BI is that in Excel, I can customize this formatting and get exactly how I want. So you can see that road bikes is sitting in there and bikes and components, right? So if I want to change this formatting, I can just format that. In any of these, I can change the fill and the color, the border. So I could add a box around those or do whatever I wanted to. I could change the text color if I wanted that to be blue. And I can get this quite pixel perfect and quite precise to what I want. In Power BI, we're working more off of dynamic digital, whereas Excel is lends itself a little bit more to printable reporting. And so in Power BI, you're not going to be able to get that finite customization that you want. But in saying that, it is a little bit quicker to get some consistent formatting than it might be in Excel. Another thing that Power BI does that Excel does not do is in Excel, in order to get these slicers to update all of these visuals, we had to do a little bit of custom formulas and work a little bit to get those all to connect. Power BI, it's all working off of that data model, so it's all connected already, including one visual to another. So in Power BI, if I select a piece of this pie, that's going to filter all of these other visuals. Excel doesn't give me that interaction between the different visuals. So if you don't need that and you're looking just for something really simple without learning a whole new tool, then you can go with Excel dashboards. The other nice thing about Excel is that everybody already has Excel. You don't have to get any new licensing or program or learn anything new. So Power BI, in order to get the most advantage from it, you do want to have a Power BI Pro license so that you can be sharing that in the dashboard and in the Power BI service. Whereas Excel, I can just save this file to SharePoint and share it, and we can all be accessing it and seeing the report. Again, not mobile friendly as much as Power BI, but easy to access, easy to send to external clients, easy to PDF. Okay. So it's a good conversation. It's not just like a hard and fast rule. Other good news is in the publish, you'll see that you can publish your data set to Power BI. So if you do start in Excel, converting it into Power BI report is not that difficult. So like I said, if you're just starting, you haven't made the leap into Power BI just yet, you can start with Excel data models and then you can convert them later into Power BI data models. Any other questions so far? All right, we've got one final thing that I can show you, and that is this KPI indicator here. Okay, so if you remember, when I select a manufacturer, that's going to update to tell me whether the sales variance is positive or negative. And if the sales variance is negative, then that's going to change. So the way that I've done that is in that KPI sheet, we've inserted a couple of icons, and then we've done a conditional formatting on these cells. So you'll see that the conditional formatting applies to this cell, and I am looking at that sales variance to see if it's greater than 0. So if it's positive, then I want that cell to be green. Otherwise, just keep it white. And then I've done the same thing on this cell. If it's negative, then I want it to be red. Otherwise, just keep it white. And then I just put white icons on top of each of those cells and formatted them. So you can see that that icon is there and that icon is there. Right. And then the last and final step is to copy that area there, go to your dashboard, right click, and paste as a linked image. when you paste as a linked image, you'll see that it's just a picture. I can move it around, but it's linked to those cells in that sheet. And if we resize those cells, that's going to resize that image. Okay, so the thing to keep in mind with linked images is that you want to make sure that you get the aspect ratio here matching the aspect ratio you want in the dashboard. If I change this, that's going to make it look a little bit squashed. Okay, so I can do the same thing in this file here. I haven't created my sales for last year, so I'm just going to do a conditional formatting, and we'll do it in these cells here. And we'll make sure that these are both the same width. I'll make that a little bit. And Microsoft have these beautiful icons that we can use. And you can use these across PowerPoint, Word, Excel. And so I'm going to search for icons. And so there we've got sales going up. Where's my down one? Let's try decrease. There we go. And sales going down. So I'm going to insert those two icons. You might want to make them look a little bit more consistent. And then I am going to color these icons and make them white so that they blend in with my cell background when no conditional formatting is applied. When I apply conditional formatting, so I'm going to go into conditional formatting, highlight cells, and I don't want the rule to be on this cell itself. So I'm going to use a formula, and so I'm going to say when the sales amount is greater than some value, then we're going to fill that as green. Okay, then I should probably swap my icons around. And so if my sales value is great enough, it's going to be green. If not, then it's going to be white. And so that is going to change. We'll copy that, come over to my dashboard, and paste my beautiful linked photo. Okay. So if we choose a value that will decrease the sales amount by enough, then we'll get that to change. And again, we'll need to come into here and make sure to add our formulas. And then we can pick, you can see my sales amount isn't large enough, so it's not highlighting. With gray it is, with multi it's not. So there we go. So I'm going to save that. I am going to pause and see if there's any other questions. We've come to the end of time. I've got one more question about the recorded version. Yes, we'll send a link. It's the same link that you've just used to join, but we'll send you a link to the recording so that you've got access to that as well. Like I said, we went really fast. So what I'm going to do is I'm also going to post a couple of links in the chat for a couple of courses. So everything that we covered today and then some is covered in this Analyzing and Visualizing Data with Excel course. So have a look on our ACE website, and if you don't see a date that works for you, then go ahead and contact the sales team and we can book in. I can come out to your company and work with you as a group. We can have that conversation about whether we use Excel or Power BI. This is a really good course for getting started with Excel dashboards, and it is transferable to Power BI. If you're not ready to make the leap and you don't want to dive that into it, you just want a little bit of an introduction, this course is just a simple half day that just kind of says, okay, what is Excel dashboards? That was way too fast. I want a little bit of practice getting hands-on experience with that. So the Excel dashboards half day will just give you a nice little taste of what we've done. Won't cover everything that we did today, but it'll give you an intro to the data model and how to use Power Query and create those relationships. And then this is just other Excel courses and courses if you're interested in those as well. So if there's any other questions, let me know. Otherwise, thank you all very much. It was lovely to spend a bit of time sharing my passion for Excel with you. I hope that I've inspired you to go away and create some awesome Excel dashboards. Thanks, and have a lovely Tuesday. Cheers.